Hello, everyone. Good to see you all or meet you if we haven't met yet. My name is April Niklaus. I'm a resident of New Brunswick in Middlesex County and the head of our education outreach team. I'm just going to do a quick recap on, the basics here. So for some folks that have been on these meetings before, this might be familiar, but always good to start with the basics. Jack, you can go to the next slide. So this is just a general rundown of our plan for today. I'll be kicking things off, and then I'll hand it off to Jack to really dive in on the numbers, both on our recent primary here in New Jersey for governor, and of course the New York City mayoral race, and particularly the importance of cross endorsements in the process with ranked choice voting. Next slide. So first, a little bit about us. Voter Choice New Jersey is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization focused exclusively on advancing ranked choice voting in New Jersey. We do a lot of public education and advocacy work. Our goal ultimately is to try and get ranked choice voting in place for all New Jersey elections. But our focus right now, our strategy is on local elections, specifically municipal and school board elections. Certainly can share more about that if you're interested. We are a 501c3 organization, I believe. Renee's the lawyer, and she can correct me if I could get that wrong. So I think probably most people on this call at least have a baseline familiarity with ranked choice voting, which is why you joined. But I will just run through some key points on why ranked choice voting is a better system for us to use for our democracy. One reason is that it encourages more candidates to run. Certainly, we saw that play out in the New York City mayoral election. I think there were 14 candidates declared. And that just allows more voters to see themselves represented by the candidates and turn out where they might otherwise not have felt the need to. So it engages more people in the process. Also, creates a better and fairer system for candidates who might be the best people for the job, feeling like they can throw their hat in the ring and not be iced out because of, political polarization. It's also key for addressing the problem of strategic voting and the concept of wasting your vote on voting for the person that you might like the best, but who isn't considered a viable candidate. People should be empowered to vote for whoever they want to vote for, whatever reason they want to vote for that person, without fear that voting for their favorite person is going to throw the election to someone that they like the least. So ranked choice voting solves that problem for us. It also discourages negative campaigning. Elections with a ranked choice voting system are more civil. You can imagine that in our plurality system, where the best way to turn out your voters is to say, the other person's the devil and I hate them, so you should, save your life by voting for me, right? That kind of negative rhetoric and panicking people tends to turn out more voters from your base. But with a ranked choice voting system, just getting your base isn't enough. You have to have a broader appeal because you actually do need to have support from a majority of voters in order to win in a ranked choice voting system. So that encourages things like cross endorsements and emphasizing not just the differences between the candidates and distinguishing yourself as a candidate, but also the similarities that you have with other candidates that are running in the race so you can earn the second choice vote from their voters. Next slide. Ranked choice voting is also often associated with higher turnout, especially in off-year elections. Certainly living in New Jersey, we have almost nothing but off-year elections. We have a lot of elections that are off-year elections, so that's very critically important for us here. It just, as I mentioned before, gives voters more representation, more of a chance to see themselves in the candidate and feel motivated to turn out, even when there's not some big shiny thing at the top of the ticket like a presidential or a governor's race. It also expands the opportunity for people who may be more representative of the population to be considered viable candidates and thus to actually ultimately win. In jurisdictions that use ranked choice voting, we see an increase in representation of women and people of color who win elections because they might typically, in a plurality voting system, be considered less electable because they're not, looking and sounding like the people that have been in that position before, and might be, looked over for that reason in the interest of not wanting to, in the interest of voting for the lesser of two evils, right, as we've often heard. But in a ranked choice voting election where people can really vote for whoever they want to, we see that success rate is much higher. And of course, for the fiscally minded among us, we all know that runoff elections can be expensive. You have to run a whole separate election on top of the one that you just ran. So, for any jurisdictions that were already using runoff elections to try and achieve that majority rule, gold star that we're seeking, they spent a lot of money on runoff elections, which have lower turnout in addition to being very costly. So ranked choice voting has all of the benefits of runoff elections without those drawbacks. Next slide. I'm just going to do a super quick review of how ranked choice voting works so that people can see the visual here. And Jack's certainly going to go a lot more in the numbers of how this plays out in real life, as we've seen in New York City. So in this example, no one has achieved a majority, 50% plus one of voters on the first round, which means the person who has the least amount of votes, the least popular candidates, that person, the lowest vote getter, is eliminated. And the voters who voted for that least popular candidate, they don't go away. Their vote still counts. Their vote is transferred to whoever they voted for as their second choice candidate. So we can see here that for the light orange candidate, candidate D that was eliminated, 4% of their voters went to candidate A, and 1% of their voters went to candidate B. Still don't have a majority, so we eliminate the next lowest vote getter, which is candidate C with 20%. And in this next round, what we see is that 1% of candidate C's voters went for candidate A, the other 19% went to candidate B. And so in a ranked choice voting system, candidate B, the one who is most liked by the majority of people, is the winner. All right. And then just a brief rundown of where things stand with ranked choice voting in New Jersey right now. New Jersey's state election law does not currently allow for alternative voting methods, including ranked choice voting. And so ultimately, we need the legislature to pass a bill that just says towns can use ranked choice voting if they want to. A big part of the strategy for how we get the legislature to do that is by showing that there are towns who want to do this. The legislature won't act unless they know that there's an appetite for it. And so far, we've had 8 towns around the state say, hey, we would like the opportunity to use ranked choice voting. We want to put a question to our voters on the ballot for them to approve the use of ranked choice voting in local elections. Trenton State Legislature, let us do that. Starting with Hoboken back in 2021, and then a rapid acceleration of interest after we won our trigger ordinance in Jersey City last year. And then all of these other ones, Red Bank, Princeton, Maplewood, South Orange, Montclair, and most recently South Brunswick, have followed in expressing their desire to use ranked choice voting in their local elections. Next slide. And this is where I pass it back to our numbers guy. Jack, take it away.
Thank you so much, April. I do want to cover, I think, we talked about how we're going to cover the New York City primary. And I think that the best way for me to contrast the results of the New York City primary is for me to actually talk about an election that we know even better, which is the 2025 New Jersey primary elections that also just occurred within the same month. When we had opened the beginning of the year, for folks who have been with us for a while, we had signaled that we saw a spoiler happening from a mile away. And it didn't take a fortune teller to tell you this. We saw 6 candidates running in the Democratic primary. We saw 5 candidates running in the Republican primary. And what we had said was that we're expecting voters across New Jersey to become more familiar with the problems of our current electoral system. We know that when more candidates run, we get less, the higher of a risk that we would have a non-majority outcome. Because of some strategic endorsements that happened on the side of the Republican primary, the Republicans avoided this fate this time, but that wasn't necessarily destined to be the case. Democrats weren't as lucky. The winning candidate only won 34% of the vote. That's bad for the winning candidate because it means that they don't have a majority mandate that they could have had and maybe deserved. And that's also bad for all of the other candidates who didn't have a shot and didn't saw their votes split and made it more difficult for them to coalesce support. So, I think that it's fair to say that we didn't want this to be true, but it turned out to be true. We had heard from many folks that, we had warned that we saw a spoiler effect coming, and I think that what we had heard consistently was that candidates will just drop out. That in these crowded races, candidates will drop out. And we didn't see that. And I think that we want to take a second to talk about why that's the case and why, honestly, a voting system that encourages candidates to drop out is a really unhealthy thing for our democracy. So we know that when more candidates run, there are more candidates that split the vote and increase the odds of the winner not receiving a majority mandate. And I thought it was really funny to see this conversation uh, happen in real time. There was someone who posted, this was a popular post on the New Jersey subreddit, saying that they wished that two similarly ideologically aligned candidates had formed an endorsement. And I like the top comment was that the original poster is discovering the argument for ranked choice voting in real time. We deserve um, a voting system that treats us better than that. I think that people wonder when we talk about why these candidates don't drop out, the less common thing, but it is true, is that sometimes candidates just genuinely believe that they have a path to victory, no matter what their polls, no matter what people on the ground, no matter what their canvassers tell them. They just believe it and they just will put every single marble into making that happen, even when it looks incredibly unlikely. I think that that is the case for some candidates. But as we've done a lot of coalition building, I think there's a much more common story that we are hearing over and over, which is that first, it allows them to prove that their platform, their ideas have a dedicated base of support, and that this support becomes leverage that influences the frontrunner. It allows them to either secure additional policy wins, secure a future political role, or gives them the information they need about where their supporters are and how to activate more of them. But they should be able to do these things without jeopardizing majority rule. I think that is the most important takeaway, is that candidates deserve to be able to have a lot of these benefits of influencing the front runner, getting more information about where voters are and influencing policy without depriving us, the public, of majority rule, right? So more candidates running should be a good thing. When we have more candidates run, we just by definition have more choices. In that larger field of candidates, more ideas, policy solutions, perspective, voices make it into the debate. And ultimately, it is just our firm belief that that enriches the public debate. I'd also highlight that when we allow more candidates to participate and have a voting system that rewards uh, more candidates to run, we see increased voter engagement. This is the case in when you look at ranked choice voting and its implementation of turnout. The highest increases in turnout are ones where we see significant increases in the number of candidates taking advantage of the system. When we see significantly more candidates run, we see significantly more turnout. And that tells us that when more candidates run, they're able to reach into new communities, engage them, and pull them into the political process when they might have been formerly disengaged, right? So that diverse field of candidates brings in more voters into the political process, and it just makes people feel that the concerns are being represented. I think that to dive into that a little bit more, we see that the pressure to avoid splitting the vote is disproportionately put on candidates of color and women candidates, which creates incredibly unfair representation that doesn't represent our communities and is just blatantly wrong. I think that what's important when we look at what how our voting system should be working, it should be giving us more choices, increasing more voters, and improving and giving us accurate representation of our communities. We saw that New York City's implementation of ranked choice voting delivered on all of those fronts. And I want to dive into the data to talk about how it's clear that New York City achieved all of those things. So this is a similar story to 2021, but I think it's worth hitting a few of these points. First, New York City voters had 12 candidates running for mayor this year, and their city council also had larger, more competitive fields than their pre-ranked choice voting elections. We saw that New York City, this current New York City primary, had the highest voter turnout in decades, like since 1989. And the last time they beat this record was 2021 when they used ranked choice voting originally. So we're seeing clear evidence that not only do New York City voters have more choices, But it's just true that those additional candidates are engaging new voters who would never have engaged in a off-year June Democratic primary. And because of that, significantly more voters are engaging in the political process, and ultimately that's a great thing. We're also seeing the points that we've consistently made that more candidates and less strategic voting increases representation be incredibly true. New York City sustained historic gains in diversity in 2021, and in 2025, they mainly maintained those goals. Uh, when New York City switched to ranked choice voting in 2021, their city council switched to being majority women. And it had always been majority candidates of color pre ranked choice voting, but after ranked choice voting, candidates of color saw significant gains that actually represented much closer to their proportion of the population in New York City. I also want to dive into this. You're not going to see any numbers that would have significantly changed since 2021. Actually, just to give you a sense, all of the numbers that you're seeing here are within 1% of how they were in 2021. But I want to repeat this because it's just incredible that this is consistent. 96% of New York City voters found the ranked choice voting ballot to be simple to complete. 76% said they wanted to keep or expand ranked choice voting. And 81% they understood ranked choice voting extremely or very well. That's pretty great. At 96%, we're kind of getting into the territory where, like, in the poll, people might accidentally click on the wrong option. I'll definitely take that. And I think that the 76% number in the most recent poll that we saw for 2025 New York City voters tells us, I think, what a really validating point for why we've been really focused on ranked choice voting for municipal elections as the key place to start. We see consistently that voters are most likely and most willing to try ranked choice voting at the local level. And we see that they like it and they want to keep it and expand it. So I think that this data strongly affirms a lot of our thesis about our analysis of where the best place to start of introducing ranked choice voting to voters is. I also want to highlight, so they asked a new question, which I thought was really interesting. So they asked voters basically, how many candidates did you rank? 82% said they ranked two or more, which means that for 82% of voters, they filled out a ballot that was more powerful than the ballot they had originally, and 45% reported ranking five candidates. I wanted to dive into one answer, which is that there are some people who just ranked one candidate, and it was clear that overwhelmingly 87% said it was the only candidate they liked. It's true that with ranked choice voting, if you only like one candidate, that is an incredibly valid way to express your vote. But ranking more candidates always gives you more backup options to make your vote more powerful. So if there are voters out there who only liked one candidate after this election, and that's fine. But I think that it's great that we gave 82% of voters an option to have their vote remain powerful and count, even if their favorite candidate couldn't win. So really, really great results from the polling there. I also want to talk about what felt new in 2025, just as some friends looking across the river, is that it feels that the groups and coalitions feel like they started to understand ranked choice voting better. I will be honest, it felt as though in 2021, some campaigns were running a pre-RCV playbook. But here, I think in this 2025 election, it's clear the candidates got the memo about the importance of ranked choice voting and how to really increase more engagement, get voters to rank them second and third, and really help ensure majority support. So I think that the first thing that we saw was candidates built broader coalitions. Campaigns strategically, ran multiple candidates on a single slate, appealing to different communities to maximize turnout. What that looked like for example, in one coalition, you could say the Working Families Party slate, they ran a variety of candidates that appealed to different communities to maximize turnout. So they ran candidates of very different backgrounds from very different parts of the city, and then encouraged their supporters to rank each other as well. So that was able to engage more voters in the process, but it also kept the votes coalesced in ideologically identical or similar candidates. What I'd say about that is it does kind of remind me of the way that multi-winner elections in New Jersey run candidates in different municipalities as a way of trying to build a stronger slate. I think that lesson of trying to field a diverse group of candidates that attract voters is an incredible strategy that I think we're going to see more widely adopted in ranked choice voting elections going forward, because I think we'll see in the data that that proved to be very fruitful. The other thing I would highlight is that candidates and community groups were more sophisticated and instead of giving just broad vote for these people endorsements, transitioned to making it directly clear how they wanted their supporters to rank each candidate. And we see that this is significantly more effective. The rank X candidate second is a much clearer ask to voters than rank this candidate somewhere. Um, we also saw some advanced campaign tactics. I'll be honest, the do not rank so and so tactic was novel and surprising, but it was clearly effective. I think that some campaigns really actively urge supporters to not rank some of the major candidates, aiming to prevent them from gaining crucial second choice votes. But I think that the most impactful one was the cross endorsements. In 2021, only one candidate only one candidate encouraged voters to rank another candidate second, and that candidate didn't even endorse them back. So I think that New York City has gone a significantly long way in terms of their sophistication with encouraging voters to rank additional candidates and actually collaborate rather than tear each other down. So I want to jump into that's a lot of words, and I want to jump into what this looked like on the ground in New York City. I think you could broadly organize a lot of the endorsements that we saw into two different alliances, we'll call it, for the purposes of this presentation. So we saw several candidates cluster their endorsements around former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Jessica Ramos and Whitney Tilson endorsed Andrew Cuomo as their second choice. And then there were several candidates who had endorsed Mamdani, Zohran Mamdani. So Zohran Mamdani and Brad Lander endorsed each other as their second choice. And then Michael Blake later endorsed Zohran Mamdani as their second choice. Zohran Mamdani returned by encouraging his supporters to rank him third. There were other candidates that vaguely encouraged their supporters to rank Zohran somewhere. Ultimately, we don't have data on how successful that was, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But I think that as we've talked about, the clear number endorsements tend to be the most effective and tend to be what's used internationally. So that's what we'll look at when we're trying to measure the cohesiveness of these two alliances. Let's jump into how this actual race went with real numbers. Okay. So first, when we saw these results originally, I think that there's a few key takeaways that I would take away from this slide. First, we saw a significant percentage of first choice votes were aligned with only two candidates. Keep in mind, only four candidates broke a 2% vote threshold. So Zohran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo, as was kind of expected given the coalescing of endorsements, it's clear that candidates saw from their own canvassing, from polling, that voters were broadly coalescing towards those two candidates. But another important takeaway is that Zohran Mamdani did not have the majority of support among voters last week. What we got yesterday, and what we've been crunching the numbers with, is that we finally got the ranked choice voting results. As I mentioned earlier, very few candidates even broke a 2% threshold. And just to give you an idea, if every single if every single voter for every candidate below Brad Lander had put Brad Lander second, Brad Lander would not have been able to overtake the next candidate. So basically, the rest of the candidates were so far down that it was clearly a two-man race. What New York City does is something very standard, used both across the United States and internationally, which is called batch elimination. If it's impossible for any of those candidates to catch up, if all of the supporters underneath them put them next, then we go ahead and in one single batch eliminate those candidates, and we keep those votes alive by counting their backup, right? So this means that for all of the write-ins, all of the minor candidates, all of the other alternative candidates, we looked at their ballot and we checked, okay, they liked so-and-so candidate first, but did they rank Zoran? Did they rank Cuomo? Or did they rank none of the above? And you could see that with 56% of voters who had ranked Zoran somewhere on their ballot or Cuomo somewhere on their ballot, 56% of voters preferred Zoran Mamdani over Andrew Cuomo. And that is why Zohran Mamdani won. But I want to dive a little bit more into these numbers. I think that we can actually do a little bit better at visualizing this. So if you remember those alliances earlier, we can actually look at these numbers a little bit more closely um, to get a deeper picture into how these alliances work. So if we look at those first choice votes, we can see actually that 37.7% of voters voted for either Andrew Cuomo or a candidate who had endorsed Andrew Cuomo as a second choice. For Zohran Mamdani, we saw that 55.1% had voted for him or a candidate who had endorsed him as a second choice. And then we saw 7.2% of voters vote for someone else. As a reminder, though, about 5% of voters in that other category had broadly encouraged their supporters to vote for Mamdani somewhere on the ballot and not rank Andrew Cuomo. After ranked choice voting had been applied, we saw that Andrew Cuomo did make gains. And unfortunately, because of the way that New York City reports their ballots, we won't know from which candidates he made gains until July 15th. But we do know that he did make gains, but not nearly enough. Mamdani was able to clearly retain most of his alliance and maintain the support of the vast majority of people who had um, indicated they were interested in a candidate similar to Mamdani. So with ranked choice voting, Zoran was able to grow an 8-point lead that he had with first choice votes to about a 12-point victory with ranked choice voting. This is most likely because he consolidated support from voters that had followed from cross endorsements, but we also think that Zoran overperformed among voters who had not who had voted for a candidate who had not cross endorsed. We suspect that Andrew Cuomo did pick up some voters from candidates who did endorse Mamdani, but it was not nearly enough to change the outcome. 87% of voters who didn't rank multiple candidates said it was only because they liked one candidate. So we suspect that among voters who did not rank Mamdani and Cuomo, it was most likely because they didn't like either candidate, suggesting that these voters might have stayed home if they didn't even have the option, if they only had the option to vote between these two candidates. But their vote and their voice was still heard. So we'll be able to provide a more detailed breakdown and a more detailed analysis on July 15th. On a lot of these numbers, and we're really looking forward to testing some hypotheses we have on the strength of some of these cross endorsements and seeing their effectiveness. But one thing I would highlight is that we don't have a test case from beforehand. So we don't know, for example, if Adrienne Adams, if Adrienne Adams had strongly cross endorsed Mamdani, what that would have changed. Nor do we know if Michael Blake had not cross endorsed, whether or not support from his voters would look different. So unfortunately, we only have the one reality we live in. We don't have a lot of data, but we will work what we have, and we'll get back to you with more additional analysis when that's available. I think just to close, I think that one point I'd really strongly make is that we did hear from voters as we were waiting for these ranked choice voting results that it is frustrating to frankly wait for the ranked choice voting results for some time. I want to call out a few things. First, New York City, New York City's existing implementation of ranked choice voting is far better than the expensive and time-wasting runoff elections they used to have. If we had a little bit more vote splitting, and if we had held this election in 2019, voters would be voting again in an off-year runoff election in the middle of the heat in a time-wasting runoff that nobody would have wanted to do. So let's just be clear that we are significantly better than the status quo. But New York City Board of Elections should definitely consider learning from places in the US or abroad who improve the way that they run and report ranked choice voting elections. Just to keep in mind, 79% of jurisdictions report ranked choice voting results within 24 hours. So there's certainly room for New York City to improve and to learn some best practices there. And we're hoping to be able to provide education to folks in terms of election administrators in New Jersey about those best practices so we can have timely reporting from the get-go. I do want to, as we come to a close, talk about how you can get involved. As a reminder, we are a 100% volunteer-run organization. So there are lots of teams where you can get involved. There is the campaigns team focused on engaging with local lawmakers, focused on helping support activists who are interested in ranked choice voting, helping to do coalition building with other alternative organizations. There's the education outreach team. They do ranked choice voting immersion events across the state, whether that be a Rank the Beers event, a presentation with a local chapter of a political party, or a opportunity to teach ranked choice voting to the Princeton Skiing and Sailing Club. That one's always funny to me. And last but not least, there's my team. If you are interested in this amount of research and data, and you're the kind of person who is quite interested in this stuff, my team, the communications team, does our social media and website, but we also do a lot of the policy research behind the scenes to be able to help provide effective education materials for those two other teams. So yeah, the other most important thing is that uh, we've had a lot of conversations about ranked choice voting. We had, frankly, a huge interest in ranked choice voting in terms of Google searches. So it's clear that friends and family are seeing ranked choice voting. This is a really great opportunity for you to tell them to sign our petition. It does actually genuinely matter. If this matters to them, then please reach out to them about whether or not they'd be interested in volunteering. I'd also call out that now is as good of a time as ever to engage local officials if they're supporters, making progress on either resolution or trigger ordinance. And the last thing I'd say is that honestly, any connections you have with local organizations would be incredibly helpful for us as we continue to coalition build and work on improving our democracy. So those are the big things that you can help us out with. I'll provide some links for how you can be able to help out with that in just a second. But I'm sure you have questions. We'll do our best with the ability to answer. But yeah, let's jump right into Q&A. I've seen the chat go off a little bit, so I want to take the opportunity to answer some of those questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording just so we can have a good conversation. What I will say is that if you have a question for anyone watching this recording, feel free to send us an email to info@voterchoicenewjersey.org. Thanks.